All right, so we're now recording. So hello, everybody. Welcome to our latest WICT Wednesdays. I am Anne Thompson, as you may or may not know, the president of the WICT Baltimore DC Chapter. And today our guest is the author D.J. MacHale, who is a fabulous person. He is the author of the best-selling series Pendragon, Journal of an Adventure Through Time and Space, the spooky Morpheus Road trilogy, and the sci-fi thriller trilogy, The Silo Chronicles, along with many other titles. In addition to his public works, he has written, directed, and produced many award-winning television series and movies for young people, including Are You Afraid of the Dark?, Flight 29 Down, and Disney's Tower of Terror. And he's also my cousin. So welcome, welcome.
I don't know, are we officially second cousins or first cousins once removed?
I think first cousins once removed, yeah.
Okay, I never figured that out.
I'm on.
Hey, Anne, you left out the most important thing.
What?
DJ is the winner of a Cable Ace Award.
Oh,
did you realize that? For Chris Cross, right?
Yes.
Oh,
well, so he's in the family. It's great.
Excellent. Even better. Had I known that, we would have promoted that a little bit more, but I didn't realize. Thank you, Rob. This is excellent. So today's topic, we're going to talk about writing as a hobby, or frankly, as therapy. And so let's get started. So DJ, how did you get started writing? Was it always a part of who you were?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. And I have to apologize for wearing a baseball cap because like many others of us, my wife did a buzz cut on me, and she did a fabulous job. But the problem is I've got a head like Frankenstein, and it's not a good look. So
it'll last you a while, in other words.
Yeah. Well, I did it early, knowing it would grow back by the time this whole craziness is over. So forgive the cap that I'm wearing here. I look like a writer, but wearing a cap. How did I get started with writing? I speak at schools all the time, and I love to lead with this by saying that I got into writing because I hated to write. And what I learned was not so much that I hated to write, it's that I hated the grunt process of writing. I hated having to sit still in a chair and look at a blank piece of paper and focus and not be running around outside and all that kind of stuff. So, but I was always a storyteller. And I remember, I think I was like in third grade, and we had to take one of these standardized tests where they ask you 100 questions and, you know, random questions that make no sense. And the kind that Betty Ann's husband used to administer to people.
Yeah.
and somehow that would come out to tell you what you should do for a career. And mine came out as writer. And at the time I'm like, yeah, right. I'm going to be an astronaut. Yeah. So, but realistically, but in school, you have to write. There's no way around it. So what I gravitated to starting in kind of middle school, junior high, was I started making films and videos rather than having to write that classic standard report, because I hated the discipline of that. And that started in 8th grade all the way through high school. Whenever we had to do a report or an essay on something, rather than writing that classic 4-page whatever report, my friends and I would get together and make a film or a video instead. Not realizing two things. If we had just written the dumb reports, it would have taken a fraction of the time.
Right.
But also, there's just as much writing involved in doing that as there was writing the classic, standard essay. So it was all through school that I ended up writing probably more than any other kid in that school. Ended up going to film school at NYU, and you have to take a writing class or writing courses. And the first day of this class, I went to this professor and I said, this is going to be ugly. And she said, why? And I said, I hate to write. And she laughed. And I was like, what? She said, DJ, you like making up stories, right? I'm like, yeah. And you like, based on the feedback you get from your story, you change your story, make it funnier or scarier. Yeah. Doofus, what do you think writing is? So I was like, I didn't quite realize that. So when I got out of film school, not that I wanted to be a writer, but that seemed to me to be the one I felt I had an aptitude for it at that point, even though I still hated sitting down looking at that blank piece of paper.
Right.
But that seemed to me the best and most logical way for me to get into the film and TV business. So that's how I ended up. That's how I became a writer, and the rest is history.
Well, so then you may have already answered the second question, which is, have you always written fiction? It sounds like yes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. People have come to me with ideas to say, well, you're an author. Why don't you write a book about something that's important? I'm like, I don't know where to begin. I don't know. I mean, even fiction springs from reality. I mean, when you're a fiction writer, using your own experiences and your friends' experiences and all that. So ultimately, that's not fiction. But you then fictionalize what you know. But in terms of writing things that are I take that back. I take that back. My first career getting out of college, as I'm trying to write screenplays and scripts, entertainment things, for years, I wrote, directed, and produced educational videos. I wrote public service announcements, television commercials, educational films. So yeah, I tend to gloss over that period of my career, but yeah, absolutely. I guess I always did. I never wrote something that was ultimately consumed by a reader. It always ended up on screen. But yeah, I guess I did. Frankly, I guess I did write nonfiction quite a bit, but nonfiction, more documentary, let's put it that way.
Right. What the interesting thing about screenwriting, which many of our folks on the call may not realize, is that even though they call it unscripted, if it's a reality show or something, it actually does have a script that goes with it. It's just sort of high level, this is what we're doing. It may not be as detailed as like a movie or a television show. So that's cool.
Sure, there's a lot of writing that goes into reality shows. There's also a lot of writing. My wife used to work on a show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? Which is all about improv comedy.
Love that show.
It's a great, and it's still going to this day. It's like the show that will never end. But there's a lot of writing that went into that show. Not the actual improv part, though you could argue that, again, define writing. People say, I think you have a question about this too, but writing isn't necessarily sitting at a computer and doing this all the time. Writing is kind of working up here. And those improv comics are writing. They happen to be performing it on the spot, but there are also a lot of writers who write the situations and write that. So there's writing in every phase of life. One of the things I like to do with kids in schools, I ask them, it's like, tell me something that's written. And the list goes on and on and on. And the irony is that today people say how, well, reading is dead and no one reads anything anymore. It's like, what are you, serious? How do people communicate?
Right.
People are writing everything. And it's pressure because it's hard to get across intent or emotion or whatnot, just words. How many times have you read a text or an email and said, well, yeah, thanks. And that wasn't the intent at all, right? It's hard to write well.
Yeah, absolutely. On that, good segue. Do you just sit down and just start writing if you have an idea, or do you spend time sort of creating your world first and then filling it with the characters that will inhabit it eventually?
Well, like I said before, the hardest thing in the world, besides everything about writing, the hardest thing in the world is to sit down at your computer and go, okay, I'm going to write a story now. Go. Death. It just doesn't happen. You have to have some kind of spark of something for it to take off. I love saying this, how my wife and my daughter and I, we backpack and we hike a lot. My daughter hates it. So I try to keep her entertained while we're on a 10-mile hike. And what you always say is, Dad, tell me a story. And my first reaction is, I'm off duty, give me a break. I don't want to come up with a story. But what I'll say to her is, and this sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. I say, give me two things, just two random things, a computer mouse and a stapler. As soon as you have those two things or that one thing, then suddenly the ideas start to form. So you never know where that initial spark is going to come from. When I do have an initial spark about, oh, I'd like to write a story generally about X, whatever it happens to be. For me, and for everyone, should be, the number one most important thing are who are the characters. Because, I mean, think about it, when you're reading something, you're watching a TV show or a movie or whatnot, what you care about are the characters. You want to either like them or hate them. And the story and the plot and the setting are just the things that are the speed bumps along the way that are preventing your character from getting what they want.
Right.
So when I did that show, Are You Afraid of the Dark, which was a scary show for kids, it was an anthology show, and I didn't have a writing staff. I had people pitch me ideas, scripts, and then I'd usually hire that person to write the script, and I'd end up having to write it myself. But inevitably, what would happen was someone would come to me and they'd say, I'd say, what's your idea? And I'd say, I have an idea about a haunted mug. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Who are the characters? Like, I don't know, a couple of kids. Anyway, in this haunted mug, every time you drink from it, you can see the future.
Wow.
Well, that's cool, but who are the kids? I'm like, who cares? A couple of kids. Like, no. I want a story about a couple of kids, couple of characters, one character, whatever, who I am really going to care about, who are going through something, real life, something, some conflict in their life that's interesting, that's relatable, that is emotional, that'll draw the viewer in to make us either really like them or care about them or hate them, whatever it happens to be. Because then when they come across the haunted mug, then we're with them.
Right.
So a lot of times it's hard. And to this day, people say, I've got this great idea for a book or whatever. And it's always some grand setup of, there are these worlds that are colliding with each other and they're going to explode. And I'm like, okay, but who's it about? And so when I sit down to answer your question, a long-winded answer, it's like, it kind of goes like this. I'm like, okay, I have an idea, kind of a setting, but what's it about? And how are these people going to play into this? And what are these people about? So it all kind of builds on top of each other before I ever write a word that anyone's going to read. The first thing I do is I just take notes. I hate to call it an outline because that sounds so official. A, 1A, 1B. It's not like that. But I take notes down, I put them in order because they're words that no one's ever going to read. And I don't have to sweat how I write it. And it doesn't have to be complete sentences, it doesn't have to be anything. It's just to remind me and to see how it fits together. And it's really easy to change. I'm like, well, that stinks. Oh my God, about that. Get rid of that. It's not like you spent a week writing this scene only to find out, you didn't need that scene. So that's what I do is I really kind of outline the whole thing. And because the things I write are, a lot of it is a mystery component, whether I'm writing supernatural or science fiction or whatever, there's always some mystery that's going on. I always like to know what the resolution of the mystery is. I think that through. Again, I've never written a word that anyone's going to read. I think it all the way through because the last thing I want to do is write for something on 3 months. Just kind of, and they're writers, believe me, I get into conflicts with other authors all the time. They're like, how do you do that? You must let your muse take over. It's like people sit down with a glass of wine and a candle and some incense and just kind of like let it take over. I can't do it. It's not going to work. I don't want to write for 3 months, then to find out that there's some key flaw in the thinking that made that 3 months fall apart.
Right.
So I kind of think it all the way through, and I take all my notes and I put it together, and then I throw this away. It's like, forget it, but it's all in here. I went through the thought process. So then I put the incense in the glass of wine, and then I start to write the words that people will read. And my outline may have gone this way, and my story may go that way. But that's okay, because you can't say, well, I'm supposed to do this. No, you got to let the story take over at that point. So my favorite time of writing is that beginning stage where it's just kind of blue skying. And then I hate that first draft. I still hate writing. That's the hardest part for me.
Yeah.
But then I like to go back afterwards and start to rework it and say, okay, now the hard work is done. Let me start working this through. And I say this to kids all the time too, and they hate this, but I'm right. I say, well, if you have an assignment to write, don't wait till the last second. As soon as you get the assignment or soon thereafter, write it. And then forget about it for a couple of days or whatever it happens to be. Because then when you go back to it a couple of days before it's due, you're going to look at it objectively and you're suddenly no longer sweating the details of, well, how am I going to write this? I don't know. It's suddenly you're looking at the way your teacher's going to look at it, or your reader is going to look at it, and you'll see all the flaws in your writing, and you can change it, and it'll make your writing 1,000% better. It's way easier with computers nowadays. I used to do it in the old days on a yellow legal pad and with a typewriter. That was much less fun. But now, search and delete and cut and paste is easy.
Yes, cut paste is a godsend.
Oh gosh.
Do you know, there's this mantra, this advice, write every day, and that's the way you become a writer, and that's the way you can do it. But to me, that always seems like pressure. What is your opinion of that?
I've heard that too, and I never have I gotten to the end of a day gone, I didn't write today. Oh no, I've lost it all. And a lot of that has to do with what I said before, is that writing isn't sitting at a computer writing words. A lot of it's just thinking through stories. Every day, in some way, shape, or form, I will be thinking about the story I'm working on or the next story I'm working on.
Right.
And that's writing too.
Yeah.
So yes, and answer the realistic and easy answer is, yeah, I write every day. I don't necessarily type every day, but I'm thinking about the story every day. And also akin to that is people have asked me, what motivates you to write? How do you, because writing is hard. Everyone here who's tried it, it's hard to sit down and focus yourself. It's difficult. And it's what motivates you. And that's easy. My mortgage. It's amazing how, and it's amazing how great deadlines are.
Oh, deadlines.
Oh, I mean, the whole saying about the task expands the amount of time you give yourself to do it. I can take 3 months to write 2/3 of a book, and then suddenly the deadline's in a week, and suddenly the creativity gets amazing. How it just kind of flows like that. I'm like, wow, that's pretty bad. So the hardest thing to do, what I can't imagine, you talk about writing as a hobby. Well, I can't relate to that because my hobby is my work. But I can't imagine having the discipline, because it is so hard, having the discipline to write if I didn't have to. That's hard. And maybe it's okay that it's hard. And it's okay that you don't write every day if it is a hobby. Because then it's just something that's an outlet for what you want to write, or if you have something story you really want to tell. But for me, I need deadlines.
You making up the stories and being a storyteller is what comes easy to you. It's the interpreting it on page that is the work. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, especially the first draft. I love, as I said, once the first draft is down there, it's like the rough first draft is there. I love going back and crafting it and reworking it. And I'll go back and read something and I'm like, who wrote that? That is terrible. It's horrible. But I know how to craft it. I mean, talk about the 10,000 hour rule. I mean, if there's one thing I can do, it's write. So I really do enjoy that. Sometimes I amaze myself because I think, oh, this is really horrible. And I'm like, well, I know how to fix this. And then where a lot of people don't have that, but you need to do it a lot. Right. I mean, it's practice. Believe me, I practiced a lot. If you saw the trunk of material I had that is horrible and no one's ever going to read, no should they. It's amazing. But it's practice makes perfect.
Yeah. Well, if someone were to get started, so when I get the urge to write, I always end up with way too lofty goals that never get completed, languishing in my computer folders somewhere as a children's book and a screenplay. And, there they are, very safe, somewhere safe. Where would you recommend someone start if they were interested in starting writing? Just at any level.
Well, you said it best, actually. It's hard to make no mistake about that, but it's also daunting. If you think, you look at I don't have a book right here, but you look at a book, you're like, there's a lot of words there. How am I ever going to get to the end of that's? How am I mean, unless you're writing haiku, I guess maybe then it's a little closer. But so you have to be incremental about it. You have to set daily goals, or if you're going to sit down and say, I'm going to write today for a couple hours, set a realistic goal. And that could be a page count. Mm-hmm. That could be a chapter. If you've already kind of thought through your story, say, I'm going to write this chapter. There are many times that I say, I'm going to write this chapter today. when I get into writing it, I realize, oh, this is really 2 chapters, and that's okay. But set realistic goals. So if you're going to write the great American novel, don't say, I'm going to write the great American novel. Say, I'm going to write the first 5 pages of the great American novel. And suddenly it becomes more doable. And what it also does is it gives you a feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction. Now, because if your goal, if you're a running back in the NFL and you're on the 2-yard line and your goal is to score a touchdown the other end of the field,
Right.
it's a long way to go. You say, my goal is to get to the 8-yard line. And then suddenly, yay, I made it to the 8-yard line. So you really have to set realistic goals for yourself. And if you do that and build on it bit by bit by bit, suddenly, before you know it, you're going to have the great American novel. But also at the end of each day, you're going to feel better about what you did, because you're like, I did that. Because if you don't do that, it's always 100 yards away, and it's just like, oh, I have so far to go. It's not gonna. So that would be my recommendation: set realistic goals. And I do believe it does help to think of the big story. Don't. When you want to write the great American novel, some people do this. They're crazy, but don't just sit down and say, I'm going to write the great American novel. Once upon a time. Don't do that. Think, well, what's it about? Who are my characters? How am I going to go? What are they going to do? What's the journey they're going to go on? Oh, that's a good idea. All right, that fine. Just think it all the way through to the end, which is kind of fun and easy. It's like storytelling that you just take notes on, and then you can go back and do the hard part, which is the once upon a time.
Right. Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, we've got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to open it up and see if anybody has any questions.
Oh, sure.
You should all be able to unmute yourself, but I did mute you on entry. So, any questions out there?
DJ, hi. My name's Rob Stoddard. Thank you so much for joining us. It's fabulous to get to know you. Looking at your career, you've focused a lot of resource on writing to younger readers. I always wonder how that emerged for you and what you find about that group that's so appealing for your storytelling.
Rob, that's a beautiful neighborhood, Rob. That's great. Where are you?
Thank you. Greetings from Bethesda, Maryland.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right outside of DC.
And it's spring. That's
it is
where you live. That's not a background, is it?
It's a background, but it also happens to be where I live.
Okay. It's a picture of where you live. Okay.
Right. Thank you.
That's beautiful. When I first got out of college, and I'm going to be a writer now. I didn't know what to write, and I ended up writing all the wrong things. I was writing deeply dramatic, adult, important, Oscar-winning type movies, and getting nothing but no. And it's because I didn't know the secret. And the secret is you have to find out what's in here before you can decide what's going to come out. Somebody once asked Stephen King, they said, why do you write horror stories? And he said, I don't know. That's what comes out. He's not going to write a romantic comedy. It's not going to happen. So I was getting nowhere fast. All the time I was making all those movies as the educational films and all that kind of stuff. I was writing scripts at the same time and getting nowhere until a friend of mine said, did you ever think about writing for kids? I was living in New York at the time, and a lot of kids television was happening in New York. So there were opportunities there. So that was kind of the first professional opportunity I had to write something fictional or dramatic. But that's what came out. I have an aptitude for it. So for whatever reason, I do have an ability, and maybe it came from doing all those films, those educational films, of taking a lot of information and then putting it to a very palatable, understandable, simple way of saying it, which is something that appeals to kids and whatnot. And I don't write down to kids at all. If anything, I write up to them, and sometimes people say it's a little bit too sophisticated for kids, which I think they're wrong. But whatever. I got to tell you one funny story, because you mentioned something before. Before I won that Cable Ace Award, I was actually nominated for one before that. It was the first thing I'd ever been nominated for. And I was so excited. And I got this telephone call. It was for HBO, an HBO show. And this woman from HBO called me, who was the executive. And I have to do it in her voice because it's funnier that way. She called me up. She said, DJ, I've got some good news and some bad news. Okay, what's it? So the good news is you've been nominated for a Cable Ace Award. I was beside myself. I was like, oh my God, this is great. You know, I want to thank the little people. It's an honor. It's great. And then she let me go on for a while. I said, wait, what's the bad news? And she said, well, don't go writing your acceptance speech. You've been nominated against Dr. Seuss. Hey, hold it. And he just died. So needless to say, it was an honor just to have been nominated. So yeah, so writing for young people and writing kind of that kind of fun, fantastical, supernatural stuff, it's just what comes out.
Do you try to channel kids when you write? Do you feel like you inhabit the mind of a 14-year-old before you write something, or what's the mystic connection there?
I think is that I've never matured beyond 14 is what it is. It's just the way I look at things. Believe me, I've tried to write adult things. It's tough also in television and books too, that there are different trends that come and go. And I would love to say, this is a controversial thing to say but I'm right. I would love to say that I could write a girl-centric book. And people say, well, everyone reads everything. There's certain generalities that do apply. And the reason I would love to be able to write a girl-centric book is because if you want to sell a lot of books, you have to write a book that's going to appeal to girls and their mothers. Mm. Twilight, Hunger Games, those are really female-centric book. I mean, believe me, plenty of guys like them too. Trust me. But for me to try to write a girl character as the main character is really hard for me because you have to write what you know. And people have complimented me wrongly to say, DJ, we're so glad that you write really strong, aggressive female characters. That's because I wrote a strong boy character and I gave him long hair. You know, it's like I don't know how to. I just can't channel that inner female in me to do. Believe me, I've written plenty of female characters, but I would feel uncomfortable making that the central character where all things revolve around them, because I don't think I'd be writing true.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Any other questions for DJ?
And I do have a question.
Hey.
We have time.
Yes.
Hey. So, well, thank you first for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's really great timing because out of the blue on Sunday, a friend of mine texted me and said, hey, I think I have an idea for a reality show. I'm going to write a reality show and pitch it. And I was watching a movie. I'm not sure how the subject came up, but with my limited knowledge, I tried to explain that he needed a script and a treatment, which Anne brought up earlier. Even though it's reality, you still need a script. And so I think I asked her, like, okay, well, do you have a treatment? What are you going to pitch? And like, he's in healthcare and totally was just clueless. So I promised that I would look into it and do some research later this week, which I am going to do. But I thought that this was a great time to kind of bring it up and see if you had any advice.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I can't speak with any real authority about reality television because I've never done it. But reality television, in some ways, isn't different than any other television. And that is, or any other business proposal, frankly, is you have to write a proposal. You have to have a very solid idea about what your show is going to be about and being able to present it in a concise written manner. 3-4 pages, that's it. It's a pitch.
Okay.
With everything that I pitch, we call it the leave behind. I'll write a 3 or 4 page proposal like I just described, which really supplements. It's the leave behind after I come in to verbally pitch the show. And this leave behind will then serve as a reminder of what it is that I pitched, because people are getting pitches all day, every day. probably the best example I had my experience of a leave behind was I wrote a 3-page proposal for that show, Are You Afraid of the Dark, which I did for years on Nickelodeon. I went in there to Nickelodeon and pitched it, and they rejected it. They said, yeah, you can't do scary stuff for kids. Okay, fine. And I went away, came back a year later to pitch them another show, which they rejected as well. But which I won the Cable Ace for a couple of years later, by the way, to bring it full circle. But Nickelodeon rejected it. Showtime did not. But as we're leaving this meeting saying, oh, we lost again, they said, but what about that show you pitched this last year, Are You Afraid of the Dark? What had happened was I left that leave behind there. Someone stuck it into a file cabinet. In the interim, a new development executive had come on and was flipping through all the old files to say, oh, what are the things we passed on? Pulled out my 3-page thing and said, how come we're not doing this? So you need a physical, tangible thing that can concisely describe what this show is, so that someone who's totally clueless can read it and go, oh, I see that show. I see how it's going to play out. I see where the drama is going to come from. I see how, all that kind of good stuff. Specifically what you go into a reality pitch, I don't know, because I've never pitched a reality show, but everything I've heard, I don't know if this is the same anymore, but so many times reality shows spring from reality. It's not necessarily a writer who came up with it. It's somebody who works in healthcare who's like got a great idea and they pitch the idea. And so the other advice is maybe he needs to find a producer who produces reality shows.
Gotcha.
Done these kinds of things and go to that producer and say, I've got this idea, and maybe the producer will pick them up and then go and then take it someplace. So you have to have the good idea and the confidence that a network can say, oh, you can actually make this happen. That's the other thing. So that's where the producer would come in.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
I don't know if that helped. But.
It did. Thank you.
Any other questions? We're just about 2 minutes over, so I don't want to hold up anybody unless there's something
pressing
that they have to. Okay, well then one last thing. This is how you can find DJ online.
Yeah, if you have any questions, right, I answer all my email. I try to dissuade people from sending me snail mail because that's impossible to answer, but I answer all my own email. So.
Yes, and we are recording this, so we're going to get our YouTube channel up and going, and we'll put this there in case anyone wants to revisit this lovely time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anne. Good to see you.
And have a great rest of your afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.